I would say those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it, and you might not learn history if some things are torn down, like the House passing a bill yesterday that would remove Confederate statues from the U.S. Capitol. That includes a sculpture of Roger Taney, a U.S. Chief Justice, as well as statues of Jefferson Davis and others who served in the Confederacy. These statues go back to the states that sent them. If they are in fact removed, the Taney statue would be replaced by one of Thurgood Marshall, the first black justice to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. The bill passed by a vote of 285 to 120. Similar legislation passed the House last year, but it failed to gain traction in the Senate. Backers are hoping for a different outcome now that President Biden is in office and Democrats control the Senate. Joining us now is PragerU personality and former left-wing activist, Amala. I'm going to get you to say your last name because I've tried all morning long and I keep messing it up. Ekpunobi, right?
It's not an easy one. It's Amala Epinobi. The K is silent. It's a fun one.
The K is silent. Okay, that's what I keep getting hung up on, but it's great to have you with us. Stacy on the right, Stacy Washington is with us as well, and so is T.W. Shannon, the former Speaker of the Oklahoma House. All right, let's go to Amala first on this one. I mean, all of the things that are supposedly priorities to Congress right now, to Nancy Pelosi's caucus, the Green New Deal, social justice, you know, is this going to help make the country better, removing these statues from the U.S. Capitol?
You know, the first thing I immediately thought when I read this story is, what good is this doing for anybody? And all they want to do is simply erase our history and virtue signal to the American people that they're actually doing something about the problems that they claim are happening in America, these problems being systemic racism and systemic oppression within our institutions. But all it is just a massive federal virtue signal to move statues out and make the American people think that we're doing something that involves progress.
Yeah, I guess, Stacy, the kneeling and the kente cloth wasn't enough, right? You know, they have to really show that they really care about the African-American community, you know, instead of going to Chicago and really focusing on that type of thing. This is, you know, like Amala said, you know, it's the virtue signaling that's going to make this country great again, right?
Yeah,
that's what really working.
Well, seeing Amala on here gives me a lot of hope because she's so young and fresh, and she's saying the right things. And I want to make sure that we're clear. When the statues are sent back to their home states, there will not be one less black child in poverty. There will not be one fewer child in the America's orphanage system, which turns children out on the street at 18 with no additional support system. There will not be one fewer shooting. There won't be one less gang member. There won't be one less MS-13 killing. There will not be one less horrible anything because these statues have been relocated, because the statues don't actually contain any virtue, but they are proof of the history of the Democrats, which they still push this day. CRT is racism on steroids, and the Democrats were racism on steroids when they were enslaving black people and dominating the South with their horrible policies. And so now they've spread their carnage to inner cities across the country, and they're focused on statues. They've given us a holiday this year, Juneteenth, the Black community in America, and I was actually all for it. I think it was a great idea. But what about some real policy that helps children, women, stop sex trafficking, brings people up out of poverty? I'm not talking about government checks. I'm talking about real policy that actually helps Americans. They'll never do that. But thank God Nancy Pelosi has gotten our minority leader to agree that the Confederate statues need to go home.
I mean, it's the same question, TW, that white Americans or black Americans ask themselves when it comes time for the next election. Am I better off than I was 2 years or 4 years ago? And, you know, this is going to be one of those things that people think about. Well, am I better off than I was 2 years ago? I don't know. But removing those statues, how did that help?
Well, I'm not sure how it helps, John. I'm just as puzzled as most Americans are about the Democrats' obsession with erasing American history. The problem with that is twofold. Number one, who are you going to replace it with? Because there are no perfect individuals. I'm sad to tell you. And number two, I think, as Stacy mentioned, my good friend, I think the reality is the Democrats are really trying to erase their own history of the racist policies of their party, because most of the people that they're trying to erase and cancel from history were Democrats who led the efforts to segregate and to enslave African Americans here in this country. So I get why they're so motivated to do it. I just question, frankly, the morality. There's always a challenge with trying to apply today's morality to characters of history, because again, there are no perfect people, but there are certainly imperfect people who did some pretty incredible things. And if there's a state that sees a certain particular individual because of the accomplishments of their life as having enough representation to be worthy to have a statue in Congress, that should be up to the states. Again, this is just more big federal government trying to tell the states exactly what they can and can't do. But that's a problem. But what I really want us to do as a nation is tell the entire history. I don't mind. Listen, there are things in this history that in the nation's history, in my own personal history, that I'm not proud of. But the reality is the entire history needs to be told, right, not erased. And that's exactly what we're seeing from the Democrat Party. Right. And it's unfortunate.
Right. You learn from your mistakes, right? And that has to be part of the history here. We have to learn from our mistakes. And obviously the traitors of the Confederacy, they made some mistakes, and many of them paid for it with their lives. Back in December, the statue of Robert E. Lee was removed from the Capitol at the request of state leaders in Virginia. I mean, but again, you know, Amala, we still don't have the governor of Virginia willing to own up to the fact, who was he in that picture? Was he the guy in the blackface, or was he the guy in the Klan robe? And that's, you know, maybe that's their way of saying they can make up for the things that they had in the past. But you can't change the past. It's part of who we are.
Exactly. And the left will be the ones to tell us that we're the ones trying to run away from history, that we don't want to acknowledge the transgressions of America's past. Yet meanwhile, they're removing all these Confederate statues and they're trying to tell our states what to do with theirs. It's completely off center. It's completely off base. And they've completely mischaracterized what we are as conservatives as well.
Right, and we look at the past here, and again, the Civil War, very ugly chapter, slavery, ugly chapter in this nation's past. But when you talk about that the way that the left does, Stacy, it makes it easier for them to hate our country as a whole. And when that's what you think when you hear someone like Ilhan Omar, who made an appearance on CNN yesterday. She was asked about her comments comparing the U.S. to Israel and Hamas and the Taliban, and here's what she said.
Democratic leaders said that equating the U.S. and Israel with Hamas and the terror and the Taliban, quote, foments prejudice. Do you regret these comments?
I don't.
She doesn't regret them.
She never does. So, you know, we can always count on her for some cartoon-type lunacy to emanate from her mouth every time she's in front of a camera. But the fact is, I'm descended from slaves from my father's side, from my mother's side, free blacks who immigrated here from France. And so that's a part of my history, and I'm proud of it because it makes me a part of a people group that is unique on the face of this planet, and that is Americans. We are actually more closely related to each other if we can trace our ancestry back to slave times. I'm more closely related to people like yourself, if your family was here back then, than I am to anyone who is from the continent of Africa. So as a unique people group, I own my heritage and the difficulties of that history, which are various and deep. And the scars remain, but through it all, we are one nation under God. And if we are left to our own devices without the leftist intervention, we are indivisible. So I encourage people to have the same attitude that I have towards you, John. We're meme brother and sister from a different mother. We do our thing on Fridays, and we love it. Me and TW, we have our love of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and all things black, you know, conservative, which came from the campaign, and it was so fun. And then I have my new friend here who is looking bright and sunny and like one of my own children, sitting up there all about conservatism in America. And this is just one teensy little slice of what it means to be a part of this country. And so this weekend, I'm going to be kicking it up a notch with anybody who loves this country, and everybody else can go kick rocks. That includes Ilhan and that scarf she's wearing.
You know, I always tell I'm not qualified to make assessments on women's clothing here, but I do appreciate that comment, Stacy, coming from you, of course. Such a classy lady. I love having you on my show. And that's what we talked about all those years ago, right, Stacy? You know, what do we want this to look like? And I always told you that I want my show to look like America. And, you know, diversity of opinion, diversity of age, diversity is a good thing, but you got to love the country. That's the fundamental thing here, and that's what Ilhan Omar is missing, TW.
Well, Representative Omar, frankly, is the most racist member of Congress. Her own party has sanctioned her because of her racist remarks against Israel. And frankly, when I hear her, you know, all I can think is she's really David Duke in a burqa. I mean, she continuously insults and degrades people who are from Israel. She has frankly done more to stir division in this country. And I think she should really be ashamed. But of course, she's not, because she has an agenda that is not an American agenda. Her agenda is to push forward an ideology that separates us and divides us based along either color or based along religion. And that's not who we are as Americans. We have fundamentally rejected the values of Representative Omar. And it's unfortunate that she continues to spread her message of hate. But I'm glad that many Americans are waking up to it and recognizing that not only is she bad for the district she represents, but her values are bad for America. And we have to as a party. And I'm hopeful that Nancy Pelosi will stand up and disavow these latest remarks that she's made, but I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath. You know, it's interesting, too, that Jake Tapper says he won't have Republicans on that refuse to admit, you know, whatever he calls it, the big lie, but he'll have Ilhan Omar on. No problem, no big deal. All right, great to see everyone. Guys, stick around. We got more coming up. In the next hour, we're going to talk to everyone about the Navy's diversity hike we just talked about with Matt Walsh, something that he posted on Twitter. Are you okay with that? Also coming up, if you're from Florida and want to set sail with Royal Caribbean, there are some guidelines you need to know about. We'll have details on that and much more. Your catch-up's coming up next.